And then that week we ended up being the New York Times Critics Pick of the Week. And then
very cool.
That's what changed everything.
Yeah.
Then I started getting, for the first time ever, invited to festivals, you know, and that was kind of like, so again, just like some guy who happened to be from Cincinnati, who was, you know, like at Cincinnati Film Festival, I think we had 10 people in the audience at our screening there.
Yeah.
You know, and he just happened to be one of them. So that's just the stuff that you can't plan.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show for this wonderful Filmmaker Friday. We are joined by a friend, fellow Cardinal, Zack Parker. Welcome to the show. Would you like to start off by introducing yourself and where people can find what you're working on online?
Oh, boy. Let's see. Yeah, so I've been doing this for the better part of 20 plus years now. Wow, I don't know how in depth you want me to go into it.
So where were you born? No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I've done 4 feet. I mean, I've done probably 20 some shorts, but Barista, the most recent one, is the first short I've done since 2000. So it's been a hot minute since I've made a short. 4 features since then. They are available, you know, multiple places. You just got to search online, you know, ask your TV about it, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. And yeah, but Barista is the most recent one. And we just dropped that on YouTube the 23rd of December after doing kind of a 6-month festival run with it. So
nice, incredible. How have you found the reception? I just watched it on YouTube. I really dug it. I just watched Death Proof on Patreon, and this gave me it was kind of like that mixed with the stylist. Like, I really dug what you were doing there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, you know, like that's definitely part of the inspiration. Like, again, like it was a bit of a journey to get to this. You know, it was Barista in the shortest kind of sense is like sort of my falling back in love with cinema. Yeah. And so in part of that process was deciding to do it in the purest way possible. I have, you know, like when I was first coming up, like digital, I mean, we weren't even calling it digital then, video was, you know, was kind of starting to take over. So I never, outside of like my grandpa's 1957 Brownie, you know, Kodak camera, I was never really able to shoot anything on film. Always wanted to, could never afford to. And then weirdly was actually, as the filmmaking bug was sort of eating away at me, I saw The Fabelmans, and I had been putting off watching it because like I thought it was going to be really hard to watch. Mm-hmm. But it really made me super nostalgic for how I started off making movies, which was just with friends. You know, except it was with my dad's video camera, you know, like a high 8 camera, and later on a VHS-C camera. And it got me thinking about like, well, you know, I always wanted to do something on 16, like, you know, well, you know, I have, you know, financially, my position has changed since I was 20 years old. So like, what does it cost for these cameras these days? And so I kind of got into it. And then, you know, after seeing that maybe I could afford to do a little something on it, it was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it like all in, which means like I want to shoot it on film. I want to cut it on film. I want to transfer the sound to magnetic, full coat. You know, I want to do it completely old school. Yeah. So then it was like really like kind of like, because I love sort of the R&D phase. So then it's like, okay, researching, how do you do that? How do you do that in 2024? Right. And that would kind of became the beginning of it.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful kind of way to start, right? Because we were making shorts because that's all we can do, right? Right. And then now we're at that phase where it's like, all right, we've done a bunch of shorts. It's time for feature, all feature. How do you make a low-budget movie that'll make all this money, and then we can do whatever the fuck we want, right?
Right.
I love the idea of the short film, right? Because I feel like a lot of people pump them out just to do stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of care put into it, right? I love your sentiment there that it's your opportunity to experiment and fall back in love with film, right? I think that's a really cool way to approach a short. So I'd like to ask you, how would you describe your filmmaking style, right? Because you've made a lot of features and a lot of shorts. Mm-hmm. After all of that time, can you look back and kind of define what you would say your style is or your approach?
I mean, I think you can definitely, my influences are certainly evident in them, you know, like, I mean, Proxy was compared a lot to De Palma after it came out, you know, like
I can
an early
see why.
De Palma film. That was not a conscious choice, but after people started pointing it out, it's like, oh yeah, I see that. And I love De Palma. And so, I mean, you know, like I love, you know, Hitchcock, I love Kubrick, I love Polanski. I mean, I think those are all things that really, you know, like influence my work. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of a lot of like, of cinema between the 60s and 70s. I think that's sort of like peak cinema for me. Sort of the studio system started to crash a little bit, and really sort of the whole auteur kind of, sensibility came to its own, and really people were taking risks with films. I think it
Yes.
was the first time in American cinema where people were really taking risks. And I love filmmakers who can take really difficult subject matter and execute them in a really intelligent and beautiful way. I love the mixture of those two different things. And those are the things that really get me excited. And also like just seeing things that surprise me.
Yeah.
That's something that I've really fallen in love with, especially with the last two features, playing around with structure, and audience mixed expectations. Like I feel we've been many generations of film goers now, and people, generally in the first like 5 to 10 minutes, you get a good sense of like what the story is, what the tone is, where it's going, who the characters are. I like taking some of those tropes and kind of turning them on the audience, and hopefully twist, not for twist's sake, that they all make sense in the end and it's all justified, but it adds an interesting sort of like challenge, to play with structure in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Like my mom's never read Saves the Cat, but she's seen more movies than anyone on planet Earth. Right. And it's like she knows what's coming in these movies, right? Like
exactly.
she's so ingrained in the language of cinema.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting because I just watched Proxy last night. Mm-hmm. In that movie, I mean, Jesus Christ, it's tossing and turning like a leaf in the wind, right?
Right, yeah.
So is that something that you are intentionally looking at as you're kind of going into this?
I mean,
or is that something that just unfolds?
I like the idea of an unfolding in that, mm-hmm. Like I like that as I was writing it, it was sort of like, okay, if I was watching this, where would I think the story's going? Now let's not go there,
Yeah.
Like what would surprise me? And so then that's what kind of like, so then that became sort of a routine throughout it, every time you thought you had a grasp on it, I wanted to pull the rug out from underneath you and make it about
and
something
show us
else.
Something absolutely disgusting and vile.
Exactly. Keep you on your toes. What I mean? Like,
for sure.
I think that the most difficult part of storytelling, any storytelling, is the second act,
Oh,
so
my God,
I like coming up with ways of minimizing the second act and creating additional first and third acts. Within a storytelling, did that a bit with Scaling as well too, which is told from 3 different points of view. So again, you're having like kind of 3 short films, back to back in a film, and Proxy was the same thing, again, like it's basically like at the dead center of the film, it's starting over again. You're almost seeing like a story and then the sequel to the story, mm-hmm. within one film. So.
Yeah, I was watching it in bed as my wife was trying to sleep, and I kept looking over like, did you? And I'm like, no, she's asleep. She didn't see it. But I did that like 10 times watching it.
Right.
I'd love to get your take here, right? So we're Indiana horror makers. You are an Indiana filmmaker as well.
Absolutely.
Can you walk me through what it was like starting your journey as an Indiana filmmaker and how that's continued to go, being a more Midwestern filmmaker?
Right. So I spent some time in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
So I left Ball State early. I got pushed out there by a professor. And so, and the thing about LA is that, to this day, and I think this will never change, it is where the business of film lives at, Mm-hmm. I do think that if you're going to be a filmmaker, you can live anywhere and make a film anywhere. But I still think you need to have some sort of connection to that city in some way. Mm-hmm. You need to feel... or at least that city needs to feel you a part of that circle. It's the reason that I've been back in Indiana for nearly 20 years now, and I still have a Los Angeles phone number. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give somebody a non-local phone number that I'm talking to out there. I want them to think I'm
kept my LA phone number too.
So, that's just smart. And so, but I mean, like, I've made all of my features in Indiana. I don't think I could have made them anywhere else, because when I finally, you get out to LA and you have millions of people trying to put their foot through the same door, mm-hmm. Los Angeles is actually like one of the most difficult, like ironically, one of the most difficult cities in the world to make a film in.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's doing it. Everybody knows they can charge you for it. Everything's more expensive, So I don't think I would have been able to make films anywhere else. I think when I came back here and sort of having the credit of working on some things in LA helped me to raise a little money, but it still really fell on me and people who were willing to make a personal investment in me to get my first feature going, which was made for only $12,000. In fact, Barista, which is 5 minutes long, cost me more than my first feature did because it was shot on film.
Yeah, of course.
And so, but, like what that first film did for me, once it finally got distribution, I mean, I shot it in 2001. It didn't come out till 2006. Like, that's how long it took me to sell it. Yeah. And even though it never made like a ton of money, it did enough, and it got me on the record as being a filmmaker. And
Right.
that changed people's optics of me when I went asking for money again. Now I've done it once. I'm in the business of doing this. I'm not just
Mhm.
somebody who's talking about doing it. And it helped me get the next one going. And that one helps you get the next one going, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is the biggest hurdle is just showing people you are a filmmaker and not just someone
Right.
like, I have a passion project, come help me out.
Right.
Because
And in
yeah, I
regard
felt
to
the
shooting
same
things in
thing.
Indiana, I was going to say in regard to shooting things in Indiana, getting back to your initial question, was that I could pull favors. I knew people.
Yes.
I'm shooting things in and around my hometown, so people know me here. I'm the only one around here, at least at that time, doing it. So that makes it kind of unique and special. So people want to be extras. Like locations, businesses, people don't know they can ask you for money. They don't know that they could ask you for permits, like all those things. You can just ask favors. And I think that if you're doing something super low budget, the thing that can always add more production value to your film is to have a lot of locations, or at least
Mhm.
really good locations.
Yes.
It makes your film seem a lot bigger than it really is. So we had over 2 dozen locations on Proxy, but I only spent $500 on
Yeah.
locations. And I think that's what indies really need to be taking care of. You need to shoot stuff in places where you can pull those favors and get those locations, and those really good looking locations.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do that anywhere else. Where
Yeah.
nobody knows me. Yeah,
That's definitely the trick of LA is everyone's also trying to make their first great thing. So it is
exactly.
this constant butting heads. It's funny you mentioned that. I look back at some of the old stuff we were doing in college, and you do those like flat white wall backgrounds and stuff, and you're like,
Yeah,
God, this just
right,
looks like a porn that never gets there,
right,
right? And
right, right.
so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
agree
that's
with
right.
that
Yeah, yeah,
location thing.
yeah. Yeah, I know it's tough. I mean, because it is like, and there's some filmmakers who've done it really successfully to do the one location films, but it's just you already have so much going against you as being a super indie, low budget thing.
Hmm.
I'm trying to break myself out of that box as much as I can,
Yeah.
without it affecting the budget at all. It affects, location moves, that complicates things, it complicates your schedule. Of course, there's a lot of convenience of keeping all your equipment in the same place for however many weeks, but that's the price you pay. It's just harder work.
Yeah.
But harder work doesn't necessarily mean more money.
Yeah, it's kind of the most sought after thing. Like when I was out there and trying to get into screenwriting, everyone was like, we want the ultra contained low budget horror movie that'll make a ton
Right.
of money. Like a Paranormal
Right.
Activity was
Yeah.
kind of the one everyone was chasing. You're like, that's really fucking hard to do.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
That's
right.
not just something you can pull out of your hat.
That's right.
So I love this journey that you're on, right? Like when Heath and I got to Ball State, you were one of the guys before us that they talked about as a success story that we should emulate, right? Someone
Uh-huh.
who came to Ball State and really utilized the tools of the kind of film school that we had there to
Mm-hmm.
make a really good leap and a big leap into something more.
Mm-hmm.
So, what did you find about the Ball State experience or the film school experience at Broad
Mm-hmm.
that helped you get that ball rolling? I think that's one of the hardest things for a lot of filmmakers is just
Right.
to get the journey started.
Yeah. I think at that point it was access to equipment, so I technically did
Yes.
not have access to anything as a
Yeah.
freshman. But luckily this student run program called Cardinal Filmworks started up. I think after my first semester, that there was some students that were putting together a campus production company, and they were looking for scripts. And I had just written a script for an English class, and so I submitted it, and they chose it. And then the woman who was running it just said, like, "I assume you want to direct it," and I'm just like, "Yes, sure." And so
If I
so
have to.
because they was run by seniors, they got access to the equipment. I had somebody who was an editing major. That there was like 5 Avids at Ball State at the time. I was not allowed to touch the Avid, but I sat in on her as we edited the film, and I learned nonlinear editing like with her. Doing that. Up to that point, I'd only had access to cut benches in high school and things like that, so I'd only ever cut anything linearly,
Yeah.
and so that opened up a whole new door. So that's what it was. I wasn't able to take any classes on actual like production.
Mhm.
I think at that time the prerequisites was like a history of radio and television, and I came in with such fervor and such anxiety about I want to do this now, which I know so many people do, and I was struggling with like I can't wait. Like what can I do? And so it was lucky that came along. It gave me something to focus on, and we ended up shooting that between the summer of my 2 freshman years, because all I was doing was, because I couldn't take filmmaking classes, I was I was taking as many renting as many VHS tapes out of the library as possible, and I was reading and finding any books I could find about directing, and going online and trying to find information. I was creating a film school for myself
Yeah.
while at Ball State,
Yeah.
in preparation of making this film, of this short, and trying to storyboard everything, learn how to do camera setup lists, how to design shot lists, everything. I poured everything into it. And so that short then kind of premiered the next semester. And there was a professor Jim Shasky, who had just moved there transfer from
UCLA.
That's right, who had transferred from UCLA. This was his first year.
Yeah.
And he came to our screening, and he invited me to his senior level directing class after he saw my short. And so I dropped the class I was in, and I wasn't technically in that class because I wasn't allowed to be in it. So Roger Smith from the theater department said that I was in his acting class, but I actually went to Shasky's class instead. And then Shasky wrote me a letter of recommendation for UCLA extension, and then I moved out there the next year, like on his recommendation. So,
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. So it's funny that Ball State sort of said like, oh, here's a thing to emulate, which was like nothing within any kind of Ball State curriculum whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. No.
Those guys,
it was crazy.
I was on academic probation every single semester because I went to no classes. And I
Me
was
too, but not for working
watching
hard,
movies all night. So
I was just going to jump in and say that those guys really were heroes, though. I mean, there were a few of them at Ball State, those professors that saw the potential, understood when there were kids that were there just because they didn't know what else to do. So let's do something fun like filmmaking or TV or something, and weren't really serious about it. But there are guys like you and plenty of others we could go on and on about that. Professors like Shasky, they were tough. I remember his whole notorious act was he would staple McDonald's applications to failing tests.
I got one of those.
And there were
I rolled in hungover as shit and got an F and McDonald's.
A lot of kids that resented him and hated him for that. But, he was just no bullshit. He knew how hard it was. And, he knew that those kids needed more time to develop or needed a hard lesson. And the ones that he did see that really wanted it, he helped shepherd onto the next step.
He did. He pushed me really hard. Like my second year there, I started writing my first feature, and he would give me notes on it and things like that. And the only reason I based it at Ball State is because I just assumed I would still be there when I was making it. Okay, when I finally get access to equipment, I'll get some people together, and on weekends, on whatever, during the summer, we'll make this thing. And so, and he was the only one I would show it to, and he'd give me his notes and go back and forth. And then after he pushed me to LA, then that began the journey of trying to find money for that movie. All of that.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, it was one of the great, because it like if you were able to withstand the fire, the two things I remember is I was like a real country kid. So like when I got to Ball State, it's like the first time in my life I had high-speed non-dial-up internet, which was a game breaker. It's like, oh, the internet actually has stuff you can do on it. This is crazy.
Right.
And I had been just making stuff on like my mom's like vacation camcorder. Right. And then editing it on the VHS, you had the cords plugged in and you would just press play, record, and stop.
That's right.
And do that. And so like when I saw the Final Cuts bays, I was like, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
No,
I was used to using 2 VCRs at home.
Yeah, exactly. I was just like, however I could get it done. And it was, and you met all these other people that had the same passions as you. You weren't like the weird kid in your high school, right? You met these other people. And so that and the connections were the things that I really took away from that. So we were talking about, Scalene was your first feature film, correct?
No, that was my third.
That was your third feature film. Wow.
Yeah,
so was that?
Yeah.
So you had already made two. Was this the one that you felt was the breakthrough for you as a filmmaker?
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. That one, so we made that one for 150,000.
Damn.
That was the first time that I was able to, I went after actors who'd really been in things,
Margot Martindale, right?
Margot Martindale. I wrote it with Margot in mind. After seeing Million Dollar Baby. Yeah.
She's so good in it.
And she was just, she had done, of course, a ton, but she was just about to really kind of break through with people with Justified. So I got her she had either just shot that or just about to shoot that, where she ended up winning like an Emmy and really took her to another level. But through a casting director, I was able to get it to her agent. And because she wasn't like a big client he just passed it on to her, and she just really dug it, and said like, oh, you and Alexander Payne are the only two people who've ever written something specifically for me. Because he had written a short for her in Farija Tem, like an anthology that he had done.
I worked for the producer who made that. Yeah, I was her assistant.
Oh, really? Yeah. So it's like, well, that's in good company, Alexander Payne. So she just really dug it, and that's what then I had on my side, because then once she wanted to do it, and then I remember talking to the agent, he's like, okay, she wants to do it, so what's the budget on this? I'm like, well, we should be able to end up around 150, and he's like, he said, you mean 1.5? And I'm like, no.
No, brother.
And he's like, how the fuck are you going to make this movie for that? He's like, you know what? I don't care. What's she going to get paid for it?
Yeah.
So then, and I had, so I gave my number for her, week and a half that I would need her for. And he's like, okay, if you can do that, then then she really wants to do it. And so, yeah. And so that helped. And then I was able to cast the rest of it. And again, just like through a couple of years of fundraising and everything. But we shot that one on the Red One. Now, finally, digital had kind of come into its own a little bit. So the social network had been made at that point. And so I was able to use that to investors too. We're using this camera that was used on real movies, and we have actors who've been in things like, Million Dollar Baby, Forrest Gump, Halloween,
Right.
I could use those titles, like these are real things. These are real movies. Obviously, we're making a real movie, And so, yeah, that was the one.
You had the strength of this. You had the strength of the script, though, too. I mean, it really is a slick.
I mean, yeah, that was what I had, especially in regard to Margot. Like, she just really fell in love with it, and it was something different than she was able to do before. And so after we made it, like it did play some festivals and did pretty well, and we won a few awards, but it never really, like, no distributors were picking it up, and so then there was a time where I was kind of self-releasing it a bit, and that's its own other headache. And then it's through, again, like it's always through random connections of this guy who was at the Cincinnati Film Festival, who was from Cincinnati, but he lived in LA and he worked for Filmmaker magazine, but he was from Cincinnati and he was back helping out with the Cincinnati Film Festival. And we ended up winning that festival. And so he's like, oh, I have a friend who has a theater he curates in Brooklyn. Like, maybe he'd like this. And so I sent it to him. And he liked it. So he's like, yeah, we'll do a screening one weekend. And because it was in Brooklyn, like, he's able to sometimes get some of the local press to come out. So we got the Village Voice to come out. He got the New York Times to come out. And then that week we ended up being the New York Times Critics Pick of the Week. And then
very cool.
That's what changed everything.
Yeah.
Then I started getting, for the first time ever, invited to festivals, and that was kind of like, so again, just like some guy who happened to be from Cincinnati, who was, like at Cincinnati Film Festival, I think we had 10 people in the audience at our screening there.
Yeah.
And he just happened to be one of them. So that's just the stuff that you can't plan.
Yeah.
It is hard because it's so much work. And I'm sure during this phase, you are just being besieged by doubt, wanting to quit. And it is that there's so few chances in the art form of film to get that chance to share it and have a chance for it to get out. I mean, I think that's getting better now with the kind of online, democratization of it. But it is tough. How did you deal with, so as you started, you're getting real actors having to deal with their representation. The scheduling, I'm sure, is more interesting for that. Your budget goes up dramatically. How did you try to keep yourself composed and stay the course as you're making this giant leap in this film?
Masking. just that I knew what I was doing to everyone.
Fake it till you make it.
That's right. Yeah. That was talking to agents. You just had to go in with confidence, because I was incredibly intimidated by all of it, but like, you can't show that, they'll see right through it, and I had other friends that, were having that, and people that I'd met at things along the way that were starting to then come up and do bigger things, and had some of them to talk to as well. And, so, I mean, that's the interesting too, is you kind of come up with people on these journeys. Now I have friends that are doing ridiculous size things, but we were in these just small little places together. And so, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. It's just it's a performance you have to kind of put on, you've got, I mean, like, that's the thing that most people don't talk about with what I think with filmmaking or art in general, is that you have to be a salesperson,
Yes.
I learned more about how to raise money and be a producer when I was doing telemarketing in LA selling phone books over the phone to people
Right.
than I did doing anything else, which is like, okay, if I could do well at this, then imagine if I was trying to sell something I actually cared about, you
Yeah.
know, without it sounding like a sell either, making it
Yes.
conversational, not putting pressure on it, trying to strategize in a way where people are offering and you aren't asking,
Hmm.
like that's,
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, because now
yeah,
a new element every filmmaker has to contend with is we all worry about sliding into the content creator thing because
right.
you have to be online. You have to have a social media presence to
Mm,
show people that you're an entity nowadays. Like you read stories now that casting directors will on your resume, they're like, "What's your social media following?" And it
right,
is
right.
so, and that is just salesmanship, right? And how do you
Yeah,
not
right,
just seem desperate and annoying, but you want to
right.
invite people to the cause? The salesmanship is something I was so unprepared for
Hmm.
starting this journey.
It is, and it's unfortunately it's a very necessary evil.
For sure.
Yeah.
Unless you just happen to have that one super producer friend who
Right,
just
right,
will do
right.
all that shit for you. You have to know how to do
I
that.
mean, I again like a hard lesson I had when I lived in LA and trying to get that first feature going. I had somebody. I decided at UCLA, like I was taking the what you would think. I was taking the writing classes, taking the directing classes. Like, well, who am I in class with? People who want to be writers, people who want to be directors.
Hmm.
Those aren't the people I should be meeting. I need to meet people who want to be producers. I need to
Yeah.
meet people who want to be in finance. So I
Yep.
switched the classes I was taking. To meet those people. And I met somebody who was trying to be a producer and allegedly had connections to money. And we went down a very long road of like, casting the film and crewing it up. And I came back here to get things ready. And then I got the call like, yeah, I don't have any of the money. I'm not going to. And that taught, it was really difficult. And I had to call everybody and tell them it was all off, all the people that were,
Mm.
counting on it. But that taught me like, nobody owes me a movie, like
Yes.
this is my responsibility. And if I'm going to be a filmmaker, like I need to learn how to do all this. I mean, like you find help along the way, but you need to know how to do every job.
Yeah.
And just like, so then I took some time to then produce a couple shorts, that I made and that friends made, to just sort of like, I need to teach myself how to be a producer, how to put a thing together on that front, and yeah, that kind of became the way.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those. There's so many failures you can learn from in this business. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's hard to learn to accept those as a chance to learn and not as personal slights. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
also the kind of thing anyone who wants to make art, you're probably a little bit inherently narcissistic and dramatic,
Sure. Of
right?
course.
And
Right.
it's hard to learn that lesson and build up those calluses.
Right. 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 Yeah, absolutely. But it's definitely an art where you need people. Collaboration is so essential. So you need people that are going to offer their talents and offer their
Hmm.
services and hopefully some money too. And so those are, I don't know, those are delicate sort of relationships that have, and you can't harass people into things and
Hmm.
so I don't know. There's a balance that I think has to be found in all of it.
Yeah, for sure. So we're coming up on the 10-year anniversary of Proxy.
Hmm.
Has this set in on you yet? Have you been
Well,
reflecting
we
about the
we
journey of
actually
that movie?
so I mean yeah, so that was it. So it came. We premiered at Toronto in the fall of 2013, and then it was
Hmm.
released in the spring of 2014. So actually, one of the festivals that we played Barista at in Columbus, when they reached out, they're the ones that sort of like reminded me, like, oh, isn't this the 10-year anniversary of Proxy as well? Like, oh yeah, it is. So we did a 10th anniversary screening at that
Nice.
festival, which was a lot of fun, and had a few people come back for it. But I mean, yeah, it's surreal. I can't believe it's been 10 years. Like that's insane. Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, again, like my first one I made over 20 years ago, so even more insane. So,
Yeah,
um,
I
yeah,
don't I was so stunned by the movie. I thought it was just so wild a ride. Like we'll save it for later. We like to talk about what the most messed up moments in a movie is.
sure,
And I
right.
text Heath last night. I was like, I don't know how the fuck you would pick one from Proxy. What was in your mind and life when you decided to write? Because I don't think it's unfair to say this is a fucking cruel
Right,
movie.
right.
Like you are very brutal to these characters as you're writing. It's like, were you working something out? What led you to the path of Proxy?
Um, wow, it's hard to go back and see all the different things. I mean, definitely, you see it in Scaling and in Proxy. Was I have 3 children.
Yeah.
My fears of parenthood were definitely in there.
That fucking scene where she walks into the bathroom with that kid.
Yeah,
is one of I have 2 kids too, and I was was it really? Oh my god! So that's even worse. Why? Yeah. I had that thought once because we were doing shorts, and it's like we need a kid, and I was like, I've got 2 kids, and then my wife got really pissed at me. Right. She's like, what if someday something happens and all we have left is them in this fucking movie where you coated them in blood? And I was like, well, that's fucked up. Don't put that on me.
Right. Well, if so again, strategy. Nothing violent happens to him.
Yes.
You don't see anything happen to him,
Yeah.
And the days and the stuff that we shot with him, it's just me and him, Yeah. And so I'm by the camera, talking to him by the camera, made sure to sort of like plan it in a way where he wasn't going to have to speak, and he's just reacting to things that I'm saying and doing, and things that I know that he would do.
Was he like 5 years old?
3.
3 years old. 3. Wow. That's a hell of a performance.
Yeah. 3 about to turn 4. Yeah.
Nice.
So he's 16 now. So
incredible. God damn. Yeah. Time flies too fast, man.
So it was that I didn't want to put him through anything traumatic, you know? So, but also just like, how am I going to ask some other person's child to do these things too, within the context of the film? Yeah. So that just seemed, again, that was
some mom's like, can I read the script? You're like, no.
Plus he was just, and I know that I'm biased, but he's so photogenic too. I just think he's so adorable. It's going to be even more heartbreaking for people, So
I honestly, there were probably about 5 scenes, in your movie where my fucking jaw just hit the floor. I was like, I could not fucking believe the things that were happening in that movie.
I remember like my writing partner, Kevin, when we were kind of talking about a thing to do, and he said he sort of like had this thought about like, there's a woman in her, like, what was it? I'm trying to think of the original idea. It was like, there was a woman in her house and she's calling the police and, and saying there's like a break-in or something. He's like, but we find out that she's the one that's in on it,
Yeah.
And so that sparked something in me. And then, so this idea of like Munchausen syndrome by proxy, but not doing it in a textbook kind of way. And then what if these 2 different women who live completely different lives shared slightly different versions of the same condition, and what would that look like? And I think that's then what began. And again, under the whole sort of, again, the idea of wanting to do something different structurally and do something with these sort of like these sort of pivots within the plot, and so it just sort of started to come together in that way.
Yeah. It was kind of beautiful because there aren't a lot of movies that just reset and feel like they're starting a new movie about halfway through, right? And I thought the ability...
It's exactly halfway through, yeah.
Yeah, right? I thought the ability to reset and that kind of emotional bridge carries you through the shock of that moment into the start of the next. But there's still enough connective tissue that you're still on the ride. I thought it was very cleverly constructed.
That was certainly the hope, and of course, like Psycho, very famously, with killing her off in like, I believe it's like 33 minutes in, So I was like, what if we push that further? And like, I mean, like within an hour, you're pretty confident you're going to be with this person for the entire film.
For sure.
And again, like, at the beginning, like trying to create so much sympathy for her and then a bit of mystery, like what's the worst thing that could happen to somebody, So then like this attack while they're pregnant, they lose the baby. I mean, like who's not going to feel bad about that, And then this mystery about like, what's actually going on with her. And then if I can get the audience to the point where they have gone, like, they felt so sorry for her and now they hate her so much,
Yes.
And they hate that they felt sorry for her. So what's the best thing I can do for you now?
Yeah.
I'll kill her for you, Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, she had that line that just fucking rocked me. Because you don't really expect it, right? And they're in bed and she's just like, only I would have done this for you. And you're like, wait, what the fuck did she just say? And then later she's talking to the other lady and she's, she does that. Oh, I had a great pregnancy. I love being pregnant. People saw me for the first time. And when she's like, oh, so you always want to be a mother? She's like, I didn't want to be a mother. And you're just like, what? Oh my God. So I guess we might as well just do this now. What do you think is the most messed up moment in Proxy?
I would say that the attack in the alley at the beginning is what gets people the most. I mean
that is like 3 minutes into the movie.
So that was one where every screening I went to, in all these different countries. I stood because I don't like sitting in the theater to watch my own stuff with an audience, but that was one I always hung around to see what the audience reaction was like. And it was, very different in most countries, and I mean, like I joke around, like, like one of my, probably what floats is like my favorite film of all time was A Clockwork Orange. And I've been able to see that in theater a couple times. And definitely when I was younger and I'd go to see it, and there would always be inevitable walkouts in it,
Yeah.
And like, I would always be excited, like, yes, it's so intense, like they can't take it, that sort of, excitement of the power of cinema,
Mm-hmm.
But then when we premiered at Toronto and I had some people walk out, it's different when it's your own movie.
Yeah, if it was just a couple, I think that's pretty fucking good, man.
So one, I was sitting on the aisle. So this is our world premiere, and I'm sitting on the aisle, and somebody gets up a couple rows in front of me and walks by, and I don't know if it was on purpose, but as they pass me, I just hear them under their breath say "fucking bullshit," and like walk out, and I was crushed. Like what have I done? And so.
It is a strong choice to say the. I would say because I think the two in contention are that,
right.
And then again your beautiful young son by the tub, and you're like, what the fuck? Is she gonna do bath time? Right. Be like a good friend and help out? And you're like, oh god! And that audio cue you do, because it's just the camera drifting away from the bathroom door,
mm-hmm.
and we kind of hear splashing and then nothing.
Right.
And the moment that fucking got me was when the mom comes in and is screaming. And of course, every parent's worst fucking nightmare, right? You're just devastated watching it. When the camera turns and she's still just standing there in the bathroom, like she didn't even run. She thought she had given this woman a gift. There was something so depraved in that moment.
Yeah.
That it really shook me. That was pretty bad.
I mean, I definitely like a lot of what went into it was this idea of like keeping the audience off balance. Like I think that one of the worst feelings I can have when watching something is just to feel comfortable and kind of complacent, and and so just like from that very beginning, like let's shake people, let's make them think, because now we're going to take a little time to build this backstory. It's gonna slow down a bit, but at least it gives people the impression that anything can happen.
Oh yeah,
and they have, and it kind of just inevitably kind of puts them on edge a little bit, and I need that now as I kind of slowly, build that tension again.
Yeah, well, it's kind of one of the new phenomena in making film nowadays is that you are competing for attention so desperately.
Right.
Right? And because I refer to these moments in movies as, I can check my phone moments.
Right.
Right, where the characters sit down and they're like, let's explain all the stakes. And then you're like, I know, I fucking saw the poster. I know what we're doing.
Yeah,
and you're like, all right, I'll just get on to, and then next thing you know, you look up and you've been on your phone for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And the movie's still happening, right? So
yeah, right.
The ability, you were way ahead on that. I think you see it a lot now in kind of modern thrillers and horror that they're very hyper aware of that and don't want to let attention go. I think to the benefit of a lot of movies.
Oh, I think so too.
But yeah, yours was a one. It's like because I did one time I checked my phone. And then I looked up and I was like, is Joe Swanberg dragging a woman into the basement? And I was like, all right, put the phone away. And I scrolled back. I was like, I can't look at my phone the rest of this movie. So yeah, I think that you really stumbled onto a great formula. And again, I think it's something for low budget horror movie, right? Like people, I think a lot of people know and love Joe Swanberg now, but not like the biggest name. And so there is like, when you don't have those kind of flashing lights that a lot of movies have, you have to find these other elements to not only get them to watch, but then keep them watching. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And Joe was great. Like, he was super easy. Being a filmmaker himself, he was super easy to work with. We're working on a thing right now together. I met him through Adam Wingard. That was one of the guys I said that I met like really early on. He was going around with his second film while I was going around with my second film, and we just kept in touch. And then he started working with Joe a little bit, and so I'm like, hey, can I get how can I get a thing to him? Like, Joe, no agent, no nothing, just And this was before Your Next happened. I think right around A Horrible Way to Die. I think they just made that together. So, but I reunited with Joe. I literally hadn't seen each other since Toronto, where we premiered Proxy, and then he was at the 10th anniversary screening, and just kind of opened up a lot of new things, and just kind of hit it off, and now we're kind of talking all the time. So
that's amazing. So walk me through this journey that you've been on. So you start to find some success, right? You make Proxy, and then you've stepped away from a while, correct? So what was the kind of mindset there? What was that part of your journey?
Proxy it opened up. I mean, it opened up more opportunity than I had before. So I signed with a pretty big agency. They started setting me up with meetings at studios. So I'm going to Paramount, I'm going to Sony, I'm going to Warner Brothers, I have a script ready that I want to do that's bigger than what I've done before, but still not like a big film, but it's still, I come to find out, still a little too esoteric for that kind of business. Right. And finally, because one studio executive was finally just upfront with me, where they said, I said, I've been to some of these meetings and people are doing passes and he's like, well, it's got a weird structure, doesn't really fall into a particular genre, it's got some like odd things in it. I'm like, but those were all the things that people applauded about the last thing, Yeah. And so what's the difference? He's like, we didn't pay for the last thing.
Damn.
And that's what's different.
That's kind of a cold ass line though.
Yeah, but that's I'm so glad he told me that, because that's the truth. So like people came on board with Proxy when other people said it was something to come on board with, but it's finding those first people to come on board that's difficult.
Yeah, everyone wants to get on the successful train. They don't want to build the fucking track.
The difference with with scaling, doing a little bit, and then having Joe in the film and him having relationships with festivals is it didn't guarantee that it was going to play anywhere or it was going to sell anywhere. What it did give me was actual consideration. That's what I didn't have. You send out these screeners into the void, and I would start to hear later down the line from other big festival people, like, people who actually program festivals. Yeah, most screeners never make it to me. We have screening committees, and they, and maybe one or two float to the top and I'll get to see. But like there are hundreds, if not thousands, that like never make it to me. I was able through Joe and scaling to get a disc to the person who actually made a decision about what was going to play at Toronto. Again, didn't guarantee we're going to be there, and he strung me along for a very, very long time. But like that's what the difference was. And so that so him saying yes, a guy who saying yes means something. Changed everything. So then with the next film was like I was in search of that person who had to say yes again. And so anyway, so then after the studio stuff not working out, then trying to like kind of package it through my agency and, just through a casting director, trying to find tons of, just sending out offers and waiting for people to read script. Right? I mean, that you can wait forever for somebody to read a script, sometimes, somebody would read it in a reasonable amount of time. And sometimes it would go 2-3 months and then we just had to just like pull it, or you have to put an expiration on an offer, when you're sending things to big actors, or even like mid-level actors. So then finally we got Thomas Jane, who was at the same agency, was interested in it. I went out and met with him. We had a good talk. He wanted to be in it. Great. And then the guy who was our financier the whole time, his money ran out. And so we even had like a release in deadline that Tom Jane was attached to it, Jordan Peele was attached to it as well. That wasn't in deadline because this was pre-Get Out and so anyway. But yeah, so then that fell apart. So then that was heartbreaking after probably 2 years of putting that together. So then I kind of went off and just working on other things. That's when I got involved with the coffee shop that I own now and other things. I was feeling very frustrated. I wrote another thing later and had that set up at a smaller place. And then once we got close to making that one, again, we were days away from a green light. And I mean, I'd already optioned them the material, everything. And then they had another film come out that didn't do well. And they got cold feet on my thing, And now my script belonged to them. Well, I mean, for a limited amount of time. So I've been waiting for that. So a lot of this time has been me waiting for that film to come back around, that script to come back to me and turn around, which it now has.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm working on currently.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And also just kind of putting it down for a bit because it just through frustration and you know, other things,
Do you find that's been helpful to you as a filmmaker?
I guess we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
right.
know. I know that I'm back to, I mean, I've been very, fortunate. I mean, I feel like I worked for it, but only making the things I want to make,
Mm-hmm.
and that's become reprioritized again. Like the whole idea of going to studio. I wasted a lot of time reading scripts that were sent to me, trying to go to these places, for money I was never going to get, because that's the way we're taught it's supposed to be. you know?
Yes.
And I felt like after 4 movies, I deserved to be able to do it that way.
Hmm.
But again, nobody owes you a movie, you know? And so it's come back to like, you know, you got to make people who are believing in you, or you got to piecemeal it together. And, you know, it's just like about making the things you want to make any way that you can get them made. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The
So, I mean,
independent
my
path
perspective
can
has
be
changed on
brutal,
like,
for sure.
my perspective has changed on sort of like the pressure put on myself for it, I guess, you know, like I
Yeah.
want to do it now because I want to do it, you know, and
Hmm.
because I love it so much. And I feel like I still have something to say. But it's always still a mountain to climb. Like it doesn't get any easier, you know?
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that scares a lot of us, right? Is like we're all trying to hit that first plateau, and
Mhm.
talking to guys like you that are multiple steps ahead, and like it never gets much easier. And
Right.
it's like
I mean,
finding
yeah,
that
'cause I see these
fortitude.
interviews with like you see these interviews with David Cronenberg and you
Yeah.
know and David Lynch, and it's just like they still every time got to go out, you know, like yeah, they're looking for more money, you know, like yeah, if they wanted to make something for $100,000, it'd be easy, but that's not what they're used to doing. Those aren't the kind of films
Hmm.
they want to make, you know. So like yeah, I could go out and get you know like 10,000, 40,000, you know, like I did the first 2 movies, and maybe even like 150. But again, like that's not what this next thing is. And you want to feel like you're progressing in some way, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and so, you know, so I think that's the hard part too, is that again, once you reach the, you know, once you do it once again, at the next one, you're always at the bottom of that mountain again. It's just usually that mountain's now, you know how to climb a mountain better this time, but the mountain's so much higher than the last one, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's something. So walk me through. So this idea of this kind of personal reset for you, right? You're getting
Mm-hmm.
your script back. You use Barista as a way to get back in
Mm-hmm.
and rediscover the passion for cinema, as you're saying. So when
Right.
you sat down, right, and you had this gap, was this a conscious decision, right? Dealing with the frustrations, and you know, multiple times you talked about things that were this close that then stop, right?
Right.
Was this an intentional kind of methodology for Barista? Was this just I want
It
to make
was something,
something?
it was makes, I want to make something with friends, you
Hmm.
know, I want to make something with people that I like. I want to make something for fun again, something that has no stakes, you know, something that doesn't have to make money, you know, something that I can just finance myself, you know, so I'm not asking anybody for anything, you know, and just to be able to just go do it, just make the choice to want to do it and then go do it, you know, and have a good time doing it. And I was just going to do it as really just like the whole idea was just like, I'm going to do just like kind of like a fun anti-commercial for my coffee shop, you
Hmm.
know? And then your ambition takes over, you know, and like it
Yeah.
becomes something bigger and you want it to be a little bit bigger. And so then as I was just posting things on social media about making it, because I'm fortunate to have had films play at festivals, people just started inviting me to festivals, you know? And so that, you know, that's why I hadn't really had a lot of intention on playing there, you know, playing festivals, but we started getting invited. And so like I will say too, like I was really pushed by my producing partner on this, Caitlin Goodpaster, who's also my girlfriend, you know, like who could just see that in those months of like that I really wanted to get back into this, you know, and like and that it was a thing that was missing, and so
Hmm.
again, but you know, again, it was scary. I mean, I wanted to do it, and I love cinema so much, but you know, it's broken my heart a couple times, you know, and so
Yeah.
I was nervous about doing it, but like she really did push me to get it going again, and so she produced Barista with me. We're producing the next one together, so that was huge too, to just sort of have somebody to kind of you know give that push, you know, that I really
Oh my
needed.
God. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Cinema can be like a real abusive partner, right? Like
Yeah.
it
Oh,
really
yeah.
does beat you up, and even when it's going well, it takes so much of your time, attention. If you've got
That's
kids, a
right.
wife, whatever, a
That's right.
job,
Hmm.
it's so all consuming, right? In a
Right.
way, and it's so often, you know, feels like it's returning a lot to you. So it
Right.
is like just being able to stay that course. And to your point, just having anyone in your life that can cheerlead you is
Hmm.
such a huge weapon.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And you know, and like, and that was part of the decision too, to just kind of like step away for a second because I was going through so much frustration, so much time, so much energy, and my kids were getting older, you know, and like I didn't want to miss that. I didn't want to be
Hmm.
absent for them. So I just needed something that I still could love and, and have a passion for, but was going to be more local, more stable.
Yeah.
And so then like, it just kind of like coincided with like, my oldest is in college now, like all in my other two are teenagers. So they're starting to have their own lives, so it sort of opened it up like, like there's room now for something like this again,
Yeah. There's that line in your movie Joe Swanberg says when he's into therapy, they fucking shook me when he's like, yeah, now all I think about is all the times I said, not right now.
Right.
And realize I'll never get to do that again. And you're like, God, the amount of times I've been like, I got to do this stupid podcast, right? And I can't play catch. Like, that shit is terrifying when you're a person who's committed to this giant fucking goal, right? Like, I think a lot of people think of the fun and the red carpets. There is just so much work to do. The amount of hours it takes to make even a shitty film is astronomical.
Yeah. I mean, after Proxy, I was, again, really fortunate to have, like, basically a year of going to film festivals, like them bringing me there. And like, and it's a big part of when you're invited or accepted that you're expected to show up, and you want to, and it's great. And this is, I mean, it makes you feel amazing, like as a validated filmmaker, but that is all time taken away, and so that started to feel tough. I didn't want to miss out on their, like there were all these frustrations. Plus I didn't want to like miss out on all their childhood just to be frustrated, So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we would talk to guys at festivals like Days of the Dead. I was talking to some actors, right, that are just these like horror veterans that just, they're knocking out like 10 movies a year, right? These no budgets. And they just like, they're just road dogs. Like they're always gone. Right. And, that's how you scratch it together.
That's right.
So we've kind of talked about this, right? You mentioned your script that's in turnaround that's now come back to you. Are there more Zack Parker movies on the way, right? Are you looking at more shorts? Is this gearing up to just focus on another feature?
This new one is a feature, like, again, like Barista in a lot of ways was a sort of an experiment of how analog could you keep the process in 2024. And it taught me a lot about that and a new appreciation for all of the editing that was done before computers and all of that too. It's kind of mind-blowing, really, and even the camera I shot that I bought is a RE16BL, which was the first camera designed by Aeroflex for sound as well, so 1971 I believe that camera is.
Damn.
And like when we get into shooting, like there's no video tap, there's no monitor, so I photographed the whole thing because all you get is this, like that's it,
Yeah.
And so because even like when we wrapped, my gaffer like said to me like, oh, so how do you think it's looking? I'm like, well, I'm not going to know until it gets back from the lab. It's going to be like a week, but I hopefully so good. He's like, well, nobody's seen any of the shots but you, and it's just like, oh, that's a new way. That's a really interesting way of thinking about it. And then you think about how many films were made with just this, where there was no monitor, and how much trust was in the cinematographer from the director, like, I mean, I can't imagine. Just like, they were just like, is it good? Is it good? Was their head here in the frame, or was I mean, incredible.
There are just terrifying stories throughout Hollywood history of like lost canisters of film and how that changes movies. It's daunting. Look, because now when we film, we're like, hey, was that one funny? And everyone gathers around and watches, and you use that as like your little boost to get through the day.
I loaded and unloaded every magazine. I couldn't put that pressure on somebody else, I mean, because somebody drops it or the bag, the changing bag has a light leak in it or whatever, like I couldn't put that on anybody else, and so, and it's terrifying just every single time. And then you finally loop the film into the camera and you roll it a little bit just to make sure it's looking okay. But then you close that camera door and just like, I hope it's okay. Yeah. Like you have no way of knowing, like, is it spooling up correctly on the other side? I don't know until I open the magazine back up, and so it's terrifying, but there is like a romantic kind of excitement involved in that too. And it's a very different vibe on set when you're because it's so precious. People are very, very quiet, and every second you're rolling, like it is like the tension is palpable, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the next one is a feature. So like I said, Kate and I did like a rewrite on this to kind of, kind of give it a different sort of perspective. It's based on some very personal stuff with me, but also a body horror film. And again, a chance to like really experiment with structure. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, we hope to shoot this. So using the same camera, shoot on 16 in Chicago this year.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm talking to some really like exciting people about being involved with it, but it's just like, again, always that cautiously optimistic about everything, trying not to have my heart broken again, but,
for sure.
trying to just make my way up that mountain, one little bit at a time. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, congrats, man. Well, this will be a fun one, right? So no stakes to this. This movie comes out, you're a billionaire. Mm-hmm. You get the absolute blank check to make whatever you want to make, right? You could have access to any property, anything. Mm-hmm. What would be the dream blank check project for you?
I have had this kind of time travel thing I've wanted to make for a while. Again, that messes around a lot with structure and, things like that. Again, being a huge 2001: A Space Odyssey fan. So,
of course,
so sort of like that sort of sensibility, but with time travel. I would love to make something like that.
That's awesome.
That would be sort of like the ultimate thing. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Doctor Who fan, so time travel, anything time travel, I'm in.
Yeah, I'm super fascinated by time travel and space travel and stuff like that. Yeah. So
absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Just to kind of put a final bow on the conversation, I feel like you've had a lot of wonderful insight throughout the episode. What would be the number one piece of advice, tool, anything of that nature that you would offer to a young, let's say a Ball State student, right, to represent, that came to you and said, hey, I am a young person at the start of this journey, or even an old person, right, someone starting this journey. What would you hand them as the most precious piece of knowledge you've gained on your journey?
So something I definitely get that question from people all the time, and I get it because I was searching for that same answer many, many times.
So again, looking for that shortcut.
It's all about what, right, exactly, and so I was asked by Backstage, like the website, to do it, like advice for a first-time filmmaker, aspiring first-time filmmaker. And so that article is still up there. I would, if people want to get more in depth about what I'm about to say, like I would go check that out. But I think the number one wrong question that aspiring filmmakers have is like, what, like, how do I, like they ask me like, how did I make my first movie, and that's the wrong question to ask. Like the question to ask is, how can you make your first movie,
Yeah.
And I think that the way to do that is you must take an inventory of your resources, again, like I was talking about locations before, what do you have access to location wise, crew wise, equipment wise, what kind of like caliber of actors, how many actors, like crew and actual like liquid money, because all movies take a little bit of liquid money, like what do you really have access to, like who do you have in your life that's willing to not make a business investment in you, but a personal investment in you, because that's who you need at the beginning, because like when you've never done it before, you're a bad investment, all these people are out trying to pitch themselves to these people who have money, but they're a terrible, like I say in the article, like I would never hire somebody to build my house who's only ever made dog houses. That's a bad decision.
That would have to be an opulent dog house. Yeah.
Like, you can tell me all day long. Believe me, I know what I'm doing. I can make a great fucking house, but you've never done it before. So how can I trust you? The only people who's going to trust you are those that actually care about you.
Yeah.
And so you must take an inventory of those resources, and then you must develop a story who shows off what your voice is with those resources.
Yeah.
And now you're no longer focusing on a movie you want to make, but now you can start planning a movie you can make, you know? And I think that's how you make your first thing.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's something you learn about people who have gathered a lot of money, is that they're pretty fucking good at making choices about keeping that money.
Right.
And films are not a great investment.
Right. No, they're already not a great investment, especially someone who's never done, like, oh, I've done 30 shorts. It's not the same.
It's not.
How much money have your shorts made? Like how you've seen zero return on any kind of money you put into it. You are a bad investment,
Yeah.
And so your first feature has to end up being, in the end, a showcase of why you are a good investment for the next thing,
Yeah. That is great advice. I love that.
Yeah.
So Heath, you want to jump in here? Anything you want to add here at the end?
Oh God, no! I just really fascinating to sit down and listen to you, Zach, share your experience, and you've kind of been a bit of a hero to some of us that have been on the journey too, and it's great to hear, straight from you, your perspective, and obviously now having the benefit of maturity and getting to this place and looking back. It's really fascinating. When we're all young at Ball State starting out, we're not wise enough yet to even probably heed a lot of the wisdom that's in this conversation. But it's been great watching your career, and
thank you.
I am ecstatic that you're marching into the next phase, and can't wait to see what you do because you're such a smart filmmaker.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. It's very kind.
Absolutely. So before we get out of here, would you like to tell everyone where they can find your stuff? Anything you want people to check out online?
Yeah, I mean, I am online. I'm Instagram, all that stuff, at the Zack Parker. And the new short has its own Instagram. It's at 16mm Barista. Barista's on YouTube. That's really the only place you can watch it. I just want to put it in one place so I can see how many people are watching it, not spread it around, just put it in one really easy place for people to watch it. Let's see. My first two films, you can only find them on disc, if you want to search around, eBay, Amazon, they're still on there. The other two, Tubi, AMC Plus, they float around from place to place, all the time. So, Pluto, all those things, again, if you have Apple TV, if you ask them about where those films are, they can show you. And of course they're always on like iTunes and stuff like that, where you can rent them and buy them from there too. Yeah.
Is Scalene on Tubi? Is that the one you're talking about?
Scalene is on Tubi. It's been on there for a while. Yeah.
Everybody, there's no excuse. Go watch Scalene. It's for free on Tubi. You won't be disappointed. It's such a cool flick. Love that one.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the first two, they were actually available on disc through Netflix.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. I miss my Netflix envelopes.
Yeah.
I love that.
My second film was like one of the first several hundred or maybe 1,000 films to ever stream on Netflix.
Damn, nice.
And I used to discourage people from watching it there because the buffering was so bad. Nobody's internet was strong enough to be able to actually watch a whole movie. So I'm like, please. And in fact, on Scalene, I'd asked for there to be a delay of when it was on Netflix because it was like such an issue. And now it's funny, like Netflix has become what it's become, but yeah.
Yeah. Now they have pro wrestling live every Monday.
That's right.
Like, what the hell? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for making the time, Zach. This was a great conversation. Wish you all the best moving forward.
You as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. All right, guys, that's it for today. Make sure you find Zach and Barista and all the movies online. We will see you Monday for a brand new movie podcast.